Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. Exactly 1 year after the terrorist attack on Israel, a group of Jewish California teachers is suing state officials and the superintendent of the Los Angeles Unified School District over regulations they say force them to associate with a union that promotes anti-Israel rhetoric. Joining me to tell us more about this is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, what's going on here?
Yeah, Eliana, this is a very interesting case because of what it alleges and basically how it's proceeding in the case. So in order to kind of understand this lawsuit, Eliana, I think you kind of have to dive into a little bit of labor law and the backgrounds of that. Essentially, different states have different rules, different laws about what a union should look like in workforces. And so there's a very interesting phenomenon in states like California and other kind of left-leaning states, as one source told me, that only one union can represent a bargaining unit, which is a group of employees who work for an employer in like one location. So there are these kind of specific terminologies about what a bargaining unit is and who belongs to that bargaining unit. And you have to have like similarly situated workers. So it would be teachers and people kind of like teachers, maybe paraprofessionals, they'd be included in that bargaining unit. And so with that model, if you are working in that workforce in that particular bargaining unit, even if you're not a member of the union, you are still represented by the bargaining unit. So that's you are a part of the bargaining unit. You are represented by the union to employer. You only have like one representative. And so there's that idea of like they will always be kind of your intermediary. And there's not a way to get around that because that's just the way that the system works. And it basically compels you to have an intermediary. And even if you were to, let's say that you didn't like your union and you were to decertify, I think you would have to go to like a different bargaining representative. Like you'd still have to have somebody and it would just be a different one than the union. But you would still have to have a representative, even if it's sort of a straw man representative, if I'm understanding it correctly. So essentially that there's somebody that has to represent you in these kind of negotiations, if there's already somebody there. So it's a very interesting model for these public employees, right? And so that's kind of the way that it works in the school district. And this is the Los Angeles Unified School District. And essentially these teachers who are Jewish, they filed this lawsuit because they said the way that the law is set up, the way that the California regulations are set up, we are compelled to be in an organization that fundamentally does not agree with our sincerely held religious beliefs and actually hates, and that's the term that Shola Al-Kabes, who is counsel from the Freedom Foundation for these teachers said. She said the teachers union there hates Israel. And they have examples in the complaint of, different stances that they've taken on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and on different kinds of, positions like that. And so essentially they're saying this organization, which has said some anti-Semitic things or that supports causes, organizations, and speech that is anti-Israel, we should not be forced to be part of it because it violates our deeply held religious beliefs. So they're challenging the law and its constitutionality based on those arguments there. So it's a very interesting kind of turn there away from, this is just what they said and we're suing them for damages or something like that. It's actually saying like we're actually challenging the fundamental system of how public employees, public teachers are represented in California because it's violating our rights. So it's actually asking for the entire thing to be thrown out in federal court instead of just saying like, oh, we have this beef with the UTLA, which is the Unified Teachers of Los Angeles. So basically, because it publicly advocates acts violating their deeply held religious beliefs, that the whole system should be thrown out because of those constitutional violations. So I think that that's a very interesting aspect of it and probably the most interesting aspect of it. But then if you start looking into the specific allegations in the complaint, you can see these kind of shocking things that I don't know if we're on the record or not before, but essentially that the UTLA was vocal in its support for Palestinians and condemnation of Israel even before the October 7th terrorist attack. But that, they say that after that kind of really ramped up the rhetoric and said that it started taking action against teachers who were speaking out and saying like, hey, like, what about the Jewish teachers? And essentially that took a couple of different actions. One of them was that a teacher was pushed out of a Facebook group, they allege. Like they were not allowed to be a part of a Facebook group because they started asking questions and different kinds of, ostracization that they said, that they were excluded by fellow members, and that they had seen people, colleagues and students demean for being Jewish. They also alleged that they were forced to associate with anti-Semitic writings, instructional material, essentially that the teachers union has an anti-Israel curricula. Like, it's based on some of these ethnic studies, and that they're including stuff about like colonizing or an oppressive state, and says stuff about Israel that it is, like a genocidal state. And it also denounces the idea of a Jewish homeland. And I think that is something that these teachers really take offense at, because if you're an Orthodox Jew, a lot of your beliefs are built around like an idea of a homeland, or there is like a Jewish state, and that applies to you when you live there. Like, this is how you grow your crops, or this is how you live your life, essentially, because of like the belief in the existence and also like the physical presence of a state of Israel, right? Like, so I think that's and it's like a very interesting aspect that is also sometimes overlooked, is that this is what they sincerely hold. And like, this is a religious belief that they're like, Zionism isn't just something that you can detach, from the state of Israel. And I think that's sometimes, that's something that I've seen a lot when I've been reporting on these kinds of things, is they say like, well, you can be Jewish, just like, don't believe that there has to be a state of Israel, and then we're fine. And I think that's sort of the issue here, is that you can't really detangle the both. So yeah, again, one of the fundamental questions that they're talking about is like, why should these teachers be compelled to be in an organization that they disagree with, or that has said things that they patently disagree with, and also put money toward it, right? So I think that's the other question is, even if you say, okay, I don't want to be part of the union anymore, you can say, I'm resigning my union membership. You still have to pay. There's a short time period in which you can say, okay, I'd like to resign my union membership and I'd like to stop paying. And it's called it's like a little window. I think when you first signed up for the union, that's like maybe 10 days or a week or something. And if you don't get in that time, then there's nothing you can do. You have to keep paying. So there's like that monetary sort of aspect to it as well. And just really quick, I know that we're running short on time. One interesting thing too is that we've seen cases in the courts where the courts have affirmed that unions are essentially political, and that monetary contribution is going to politics, essentially. And so that they're using that for political candidates, they're using that for political advocacy, but that money has a First Amendment attachment to it when you're giving it to an organization like that. So that's another very interesting aspect that I think will come into play here as this goes through the courts. So it's a very interesting sort of, like, a lot of questions are raised by this, and it's a very timely with, that 1-year anniversary of the attack on Israel.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.